minute, Jack. This is a friendly celebration.
I don't much like the way you celebrate.
Okay, we're on the air. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Don Woolley, your host for 4 Men in America. And we have Paul Fitch, Jeff Utsch, and the Honorable Ken Bennett with us today. And we're going to start out talking today about the...
You other three are honorable. You all served in the military.
Yeah, we're all honorable. So we have to acknowledge your service to the state there, Ken. So
okay.
Yes. So we're going to start talking about the Trump administration versus the lower courts, and we'll continue the conversation from last week. And there is some news. Whatever you guys have heard, I've heard a few things. So please, each one of you chime in on what you've heard since we talked last time. And then we'll kind of get into the minutia of the Constitution and what we think should happen and who should do what. So go ahead. Whoever wants to start first, please do.
Don, well, I just had some comments. Hopefully we won't have the audio-visual problems we were having a week ago on my end. So we'll see. I'm parked and everything should be good.
Yeah.
But, in between last week and this week, I was able to be on a radio show and podcast and this, that, and the other. And, there's some options that we have, right? We can let the system be as it is, which I think is unhealthy and can be abused by the lower courts. And if we didn't mention last time, the majority of these temporary restraining orders that turn into national injunctions, the majority of those have happened in the first term of the Trump administration. So more TROs and nationwide injunctions were imposed on Trump's first term, 64, than there have been on every other president combined since 1963. So that tells you right there one of two things. The left is saying, well, that's because Trump is pushing the edges of the envelope. No, he's not. If they were concerned about pressing the edge of the envelope, they would have gotten Biden on, more than that. So what it is using their, political power to be able to abuse the system. Also, 92% of the judges who have imposed these national injunctions were appointed by Democrats. So that goes to show you right there. Now, on the other hand, Biden had 12 of these imposed upon him, and the majority of those 12, like 90%, were imposed by Republican appointed judges. So it kind of goes both ways a little bit. And so I do think that the left is abusing this power. On the right, there were national injunctions against the vaccine mandates to companies with over 50 people, COVID vaccines in the military. Those eventually worked their way through the process. So we can leave things as they are, but I think it's going to be abused by the other side. Or we can start to impeach judges that do this. The problem with that is I think you could get it through in the House because it takes a majority vote in the House to impeach a sitting judge, but you have to have 2/3 majority still in the Senate, which I think is going to be very tough to do. The other thing you could do is ignore it. And a lot of the people I talk to think, as I said last time, right, be more Andrew Jackson-ish and just ignore the courts. And that is certainly an option as well. But I don't necessarily recommend that, okay? And then legislature, we could use the legislature to change it, and that's what I'm hoping comes about, that the legislative branch steps up, that we need some more Thaddeus Stevens that know and understand the power of the legislative branch as per Article 2 and start to take back the delegated powers that have been given to the judicial branch and also the executive branch. We need to step up as we had talked last time. The last thing is part of kind of the don't do anything, but allow these things to go through the court process and reach the Supreme Court and hope that they come up with the right decision. The problem I have with that, and I taught a class on Tuesday night about this, and a lot of the conservatives in the group really wanted that to happen. But I kicked back a little bit on this because, that's what we always do, is throw it to the judicial branch. And we're okay to do it right now because supposedly we have a majority in the Supreme Court. But A, that may not always happen. And B, we do need a class in civics now throughout the country, and especially to our elected leaders in Congress. They need to step up and do what they're supposed to do, or this pendulum could swing widely the next time a Democrat gets into presidential office. So that's kind of what I wanted to say at the beginning, to kind of clarify some of the things we were trying to talk to about last week.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So Ken or
well, and to the
comments?
point, didn't I see where Darrell Issa has a bill?
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
So that's exactly what should be happening, is that the legislative branch, and with the president, Senate, and the House, that's exactly what we need to be doing, is passing legislation that prohibits these lower courts from effectively implementing nationwide restraining orders.
Yeah.
Yes.
That anything nationwide should only be coming from the Supreme Court, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
I would agree with you.
I think that's what the Constitution says, really. But yeah, these TROs are unconstitutional. So I think if we take that point of view,
now when you say that, Don, when you say a
nationwide,
nationwide TROs are unconstitutional from a lower federal court.
Well, Jeff or Paul, either of you, is there a direct mechanism that could be used when appropriate to go directly to the Supreme Court and have them weigh in on a restraining order by an overreach by any president, one we like or one we don't like? Is there a process to go directly to the Supremes?
I think there's. I'll answer in saying that I think you can make an emergency request, and I believe I was going to add that the Supreme Court has weighed in on 3 of these judges and overruled all 3 of them. Now I heard there's around, I don't know how many now, there's 50 or 60 right now, 50 or 60 attacks, I think, from the lower court.
They're over 50. They're over 50 right now. Yeah.
So Roberts, and I saw one of the letters signed by Roberts that overruled the judge that said they had to pay the USAID money. They had to spend that money by midnight last night. Right? You got to spend all that money. No, he overruled that and stopped that. So that's kind of happening. So go ahead, Paul. Please make your comments.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I've got is that we need to do what I think I heard Ken say, that if you're a Southern Arizona judge, that ought to be your territory, and hold it there. You shouldn't be able to make rules for Minnesota or the nation. And I think that's what I'm hearing is being foisted on the people or trying to be passed. But it's really it's so much lawfare that these guys, I don't think they even care if they win the suit, as long as they can delay the action and make Trump look bad by filing it.
I'm sure that's one of their motivations. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. The issue about going directly to the Supreme Court, though, the Supreme Court only has original jurisdiction in a certain number of cases, which are spelled out in the Constitution.
Right.
And other than that, it's supposed to go up through the court system. However, remember, the Constitution also says Congress creates these inferior courts and gives them their powers and jurisdiction. Congress could pass a law that basically says there's different ways to skin the cat. You could either say these district court federal judges have no power to impose a national injunction. That's one way to do it. Or you could say, hey, as soon as that happens, that suit goes immediately to the Supreme Court. But if there's an overabundance of them, then that might be too bad. You could also say that the lower district courts judges can't do it, and it takes a circuit court judge to do that, or here the whole circuit court meets. So there's lots of ways to skin the cat and be creative. We have to remember, though, whatever we are happy with has to be good for both sides, because we liked it when Biden was trying to impose this national debt forgiveness, and we did have a lower court federal judge put a nationwide injunction on that. You know, so there is roles for the court to rein in unconstitutional acts by the president, but who does it, how quickly is it done, and how long does that either restraining order, which is only supposed to be 10 to 20 days, or national injunction last, and how quickly can a superior court hear it? So these things have to all be weighed. Everybody's going to have their own decision, but I'm convinced if we do not do something about it, and by we I mean the legislative branch, we the people, it's going to be used as lawfare Trump's entire term.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. So here's kind of my view on the whole thing, and I'll share it with you guys. We have 2 years until midterm elections. We really have about a year to get Trump's agenda rolling, so that by next January, the economy is turned around. We've got inflation going down. People are feeling better about their finances, and we have our military where we want it. You know what I'm saying? We have we're kind of on a real quick clock here now, politically wise. And the long game to me is impeaching these guys. I would do that, but there's a time element involved. And the real long
there's a vote element, as Jeff said,
in the Senate.
And a vote element. Yeah, right. Yeah, you can impeach them, but they may not be convicted.
I mean, in our background emails between the four of us over the last week, there were questions about why not impeach Hobbs, or is that on the table? Well, right. The Arizona House has 33 Republicans, and a 31 out of 60 majority is all that's required to impeach. But you got to have 2/3 in the Senate, and Republicans don't have those 2/3. So to me, you'd be wasting your time to impeach in the House, because you'll never get a conviction in the Senate to impeach.
Efforts could be used in better places, is what you're saying, Ken. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And another long-term view is to let it play up through the courts, like you said, and go through each level of the court and appeal, and get it to the Supremes. And that's at least 6 months. And if you got it to the Supreme Court this year, they wouldn't probably, if you didn't get it there before the summer, if they didn't hear the hearing right, they wouldn't even issue a ruling if you got it there past July. June or July is when they usually come out with all their current cases. So the fastest way to get this done is the legislative way, to have them pass a bill, a very simple bill that states exactly what you want them to do. Like Ken said, restrict them to, they can't do nationwide TROs, however implicit that has to be. And then get that through the Senate and the House and have President Trump sign it, and it will go in effect immediately. That's the fastest way to cure this problem. So I was really happy to see Darrell Issa talk about that on X, and that he had a bill. And I tried to share that information with a bunch of other congressmen on X, and I was sending out X messages everywhere to everybody. So
I was bragging he must have watched our show last week.
Oh yeah,
but
that's right.
No.
Yeah, he might have, right? So anyway, that was good news. And I know I know Eli Crane says he has filed impeachment paperwork, and I think Andy Biggs has too. So and there's another congressman that's doing that. So that's another way. But I think the fastest way, in my opinion, is the legislative way, and you get everybody signed on to that. And I think they could probably get that through the Senate, through our senators. So what do you guys think?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's the fastest way. But these federal judges, that's a golden apple when they get that federal judgeship. That they believe it's for life, and in most cases it is. But you start taking that away from people, and judges will become a little bit more circumspect in their rash rulings, as far as I can tell. It's politicians and judges, all those folks, they're like 3-year-olds in a cookie jar. If they don't get their hand slapped when they reach in the cookie jar, they reach back in the cookie jar again.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my feeling, that they're just, you gotta slap their hand, and you start making it unpleasant to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think the other thing it would do is, if you speed this up and settle this out, I'm always told the court system is just, it's out of control anyway, right? It's so busy that the cases get put off and for months and months and months, and sometimes there's a delay, not necessarily because of the hands of justice, but just you can't get it on the calendar or whatever. So if you get that done right away, but I'm not saying that not to impeach them. They ought to pick a couple of them that just went, over the side of the ship, and I would point to them and still try to impeach them. And but these judges get to go back to their districts, right? They're assigned federal judges are assigned a district, right, that they work in, and then Supreme Court judges. Yeah, sure. Supreme Court judges oversee each different district, and
we have the circuit court in between.
Yeah. The circuits are in between the 9 circuits,
and they so they would be able to go work in their area and not have these people running in their door at 1 o'clock in the morning wanting a TRO every week, right? I mean, that would drive me crazy.
Right. Well, I think there's over 600, as far as what I looked, 650, 670 district court judges, federal. And so, if you're shopping, which is what happens a judge who will help give you that nationwide injunction, guess what? You're going to be able to find him or her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what they do. They absolutely shop, judge shop and find the one that they want. So, the first one that started this whole thing was at 1 o'clock in the morning. He was the emergency person on duty, and they didn't even have, when he wrote that original TRO, they didn't even have anybody from the Trump administration in the room. Which I'm not sure that doesn't violate the law right away, right? I think you got to have both parties there to do it, but he did it anyway, and then he threw it in the lap of a regular person on Monday morning, and she kind of withdrew the whole thing and said, "Come back at 5 o'clock if you got something better." And so some of them just, I don't know if it's the time urgency or maybe 1 o'clock in the morning he just didn't want to fool around with it. So who knows? I don't know. It's like these FISA requests, right? That they're getting for terrorism. The FISA court signs off. Well, they know that they've signed off on a bunch of lies, right? Several of these FISA things that they put through, they know that they lied. They know the FBI lied on them about what was going on, and so who knows what they put in some of these TROs and these requests that they make. But have we beat the horse to death?
It's not
that
moving.
Was good.
Yes, but it was a good death. It was a good death.
Well,
let's hope it does have a good death. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say to everybody, let's get on board and try to find out what Darrell Issa is doing exactly and what the bill is, and get a look at it, and try to as activists, try to let everybody know that that's what we need to do, and let's get on board and try to push that through Congress. I sent all of his messages to Speaker Johnson so he would know what's going on, and our Florida congressman, and I've tried to push our closest congresswoman to getting on board and sponsoring that bill, and they can all go and sponsor it, get it through very quickly. So
agreed.
Good. Okay, so let's get into and Jeff, you can join us. You don't have to leave yet. Let's get into the
still good.
What's going on with Katie Hobbs? And the first thing I saw something about a possible something to do with $400,000 from a real estate company or something that that
I
she
think
said,
it's old people's home or something like that.
is that what it was?
Yeah, it was a $400,000. That's what I think I remember reading, was a $400,000 payment of some kind to send state contracts to the company, and I can't remember the name of the company right now. But
Well, they were campaign contributions to her and other Democrats running for office in Arizona. Over 400,000 came from a specific company that provides elder care services to the Department of Economic Security, Department of Developmentally Disabled, a variety of Department of Health Services. So there's a variety of state agencies that, in one form or another, provide medical and I'm sure other types of care to people. And one of the contractors who has a contract with Arizona, they made very substantial contributions to her and the state Democrat Party. And lo and behold, and I think it was DES, Department of Economic Security, one of the state agencies granted that company an increase in their hourly rate schedule when they had not done the same to other companies that had requested similarly. And so it really kind of reeks of, pay for
Quid pro quo.
pay to play. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a serious issue. And that's really the crux of what you're hearing about with the budget crisis that one of the state agencies has created. Last year in the budget negotiations, Governor Hobbs requested a $100 million increase in one of the line items for these for the pay rates that they wanted to pay companies to take care of Arizonans with a variety of issues. But it did not get included in the budget. The $100 million was not included in the budget, but the state agency increased the contracts as though the $100 million had been approved. And so they are nearing the last quarter of the state's fiscal year. We end on June 30th. So we're, at the end of March, we will be 3/4 of the way through the budget. So here we are nearing the end of February. So we're 8 out of 12 months into the fiscal year. That specific state agency, and I'm sorry I didn't research better to remember which one it was, but they increased their contract rates as though that $100 million had been approved in last year's budget when it had not. Now, you've got some Republicans saying that, well, there's $350 million that has disappeared. That is not true. If this agency overspent on these contracts at the rate of $100 million this year, which they wanted to, but they were not approved to, but they have been spending, that equates then next year, if you extrapolate that rate of spending into the full year of next year, then you get up into the $300 or $400 million range for next year. So the $400 million number is not an overspending number that's already occurred this year. That number is in the 100 million range. Still bad and still wrong, but it's not missing in the sense that the money has just disappeared. We know that they went ahead and started paying some of these contractors at a rate that was not contemplated in the monies that they were appropriated last July 1st.
And I think Kimberly Yee testified to that exactly, right?
Yes, and she authored a letter basically to the same thing. So
yeah, but she did say,
and it's widely expected that Kimberly is probably one of the top 4 or 5 potential Republican candidates for governor next year. And to your earlier point, Don, next year's elections are not 2 years away. It's a year and a half.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a year and a half. Yeah. Yeah. It happens in the summer, right? Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, it's breathing down your neck before you know it. That's why it's such a problem with term limits. Not having term limits, because Congress, out of a 2-year term, they spend 1 year running for office, right? So so they get to work and work and work. So that's why we got to make hay this first year, because come the 1st of January, they're all running for office and they're scaredy cats, right? There's an election, so I can't do that, can't do this, can't say that. Anyway, that's good. So she also supposedly wrote an executive order that she's going to control the border. Is that, now that some people say that's a smokescreen, right? That she's
That's
not
$1 short and a day late.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's just ridiculous. My neighbor is a Border Patrol agent, and he says right now, I have a lot of friends that are Border Patrol agents, but my neighbor is, and their kids come over to play. And he said they're having a hard time finding things to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it has slowed. The spigot is off.
Yeah, I heard that it was across the entire border. I think last Friday or Saturday, it was they intercepted 200 people.
Yeah,
200 from.
And yet we have a Republican state senator who just sent out a fundraising message across the nation, trying to raise money on the idea that the Arizona border is being overrun as we speak.
Yeah.
So he's taking some heat for that in the Arizona Republic this morning, that he's claiming the border is overrun, and we're going to solve somehow that problem by sending money to a state senator in Arizona.
Yeah, there you go. So,
well,
you guys,
we have our own bad apples in the box.
Yeah, there you go. So you guys, didn't Arizona State, the voters approve some kind of a border initiative last year?
Yeah, Prop 314, Border Security Act. It basically made entering Arizona from a foreign country, so it's not from California or New Mexico, entering Arizona from a foreign country without going through a lawful port of entry is now a state crime.
Okay.
Or will be. There was a provision put in the bill because it was crafted very much after the Texas Bill number 5. And the Texas Bill number 5 is working its way through the federal court system, and I think will be in front of the Supremes this year. But this was patterned so much after the Texas Bill that we actually made it conditional upon the Texas Bill being found constitutional. But I believe both will be found. And when that happens, there will be now a state crime that entering Arizona from a foreign country without going through a lawful port of entry will be a state crime. So sheriff's deputies or city police or highway patrol, state, local, and county law enforcement can arrest somebody if they see that happening themselves, rather than just being able to call ICE.
Good. So
yeah, well, the next proposition we need then, Ken, is, if I would call it Proposition 49ers, that we include Californians, that if they cross the border, that we're able to arrest them as well.
And send them back.
As long as they pass, unless they pass a civics test. So, but obviously,
if they didn't bring so dadgum much cash and buy so many homes over here, we could probably get that through.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's a good point, though. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we just passed in Florida. It's illegal if you're from another country and you come in the state of Florida without coming through a port of entry, you've broken the Florida law. So
I don't see any reason why that would be unconstitutional. Yeah. I mean, the federal government has been given charge to protect our borders, but there's nothing in there prohibiting the states from passing laws like this.
And Florida has we have that.
There was a provision. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Don.
No, I'm just going to say, remind everybody, Florida, we have an ocean border, right? That we get all kinds. I mean, the Coast Guard down here is going crazy right now. They doubled the number of Coast Guard protection elements down here because there's a huge influx now because they're trying to now bring them in on ships, into Florida, right, from all around the Caribbean and the Gulf of America and everywhere else. So, yeah. So go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry
So
to
what
interrupt.
you're saying, Don, I shouldn't take that contract that the government of Haiti gave me for swimming lessons
Yeah, you probably don't
for
want
the
to do
Haitian
it,
citizens.
and you probably don't want to take a cruise there either.
I think Ken
Well,
had something.
I was just gonna say, Jeff said, there can't be anything unconstitutional about that, but there was a provision in that bill that I felt was unconstitutional.
Oh, what was
and
that, Ken?
That was that they were going to apply that new state crime retroactively against the DACA kids.
Yeah, well, that is clearly a ex post facto.
That's an ex post facto law, which is prohibited by Arizona and U.S. constitutions. But I took a lot of heat.
Yes,
I took a lot of heat from the MAGA right that I dared to introduce or hold up that ballot proposition in the Senate for a few weeks, and I negotiated an amendment that took that out, and that was one of the reasons that they then lied about, saying that I was for open borders because I messed around with Prop 314 and took some of this stuff out. But the stuff I took out would have made the whole thing unconstitutional.
Ken, that's a real clap.
Yeah,
that's
good
not
job.
a slow
good
clap.
job, Ken.
That's really impactful.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is, and it takes somebody who knows the Constitution and has the political wherewithal to get that done. So that's a huge deal. I did not know that.
One of the things this new bill in Florida did too, you talked about the DACA kids, it took away their right to in-state tuition in the state of Florida. That's a separate matter that can be decided on a state by state basis. Right.
But
they didn't want to give them any incentive to come. Well, come here and get free tuition. Why not come? So,
we can pass laws that affect how the government acts going forward.
Right.
But we cannot pass laws and then say,
laws.
We have a new law and you broke this law 10 years ago when your parents carried you across when you were 2 and you didn't know any better. So now we're going to apply it against you. That is what the founders of both the nation and Arizona, and I'm sure every state, prohibited through prohibiting ex post facto laws. You can't pass a law and then try to arrest somebody who did it sometime in the past.
That's right.
Shame on you, Ken, for knowing what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, I paid for it politically because they sent Mr. Fincham up here and raised him $350,000 and took me out. So
is that right?
Well,
I didn't know the history of that, Ken.
Yeah, you're better off now anyway, right? You got rid of all that political stuff.
I'd be in some boring Senate committee right now instead of on 4 Men in America.
And boy, isn't that true?
That's right. Making a real difference here, Ken. That's right.
Hey, so how did your let me how did your thing go, Jeff, and how did your little presentation go, Ken? Tell us about your presentations that you gave last week. I know, Jeff, you went to your guy up in Phoenix, right?
I had a couple presentations. My big one was with my own group, and then I did have one with Shane Krauser's group.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And really trying to get people on board with this mandatory oath of office requirement that I'm hoping. And so what I'm doing is playing around a little bit with the ways to present, because if I'm dealing with people who are politically correct, I don't necessarily want to just hammer on the DEI stuff. But if I can go with a crowd that is open-minded and willing to hear the truth, which a lot of these patriotic groups are, then I do start off with, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it is the antithesis of what being an American is. That it is anti-foundational, that it is anti-American, that it's anti-Martin Luther King. And then really going through and showing diversity, how the left means it and the woke mean it, and how that is completely opposite of the way the founders viewed it. And where they find strength and diversity of color and creed is opposite of what our values are. And equity, you can't have a free country and have equal outcome. Jefferson wrote about that. The founders knew it. And inclusion, and so talking about that, and then what is the solution is teaching the Constitution. And you can teach the Constitution without bashing on DEI. But we've had so many people ingrained. It's 10 years mandatory within our military now. And it has affected, because a lot of our military members, and many of them do know, but many of them don't understand, it's not just another uniform. As Obama used to say, we're special just like Denmark is special and Germany is special. No, the United States, when we wear a uniform, we represent much more than any other country on earth represents, and have been since 1776 specifically. And you could even say 1775 because of the values. So we try to teach that and change people's perspectives. So I think it is all about being the Clarence. From A Wonderful Life, it's about changing perspectives from George Bailey wanting to kill himself and thinking he's terrible to knowing it's so wonderful. And I think that's what we're all about here on this podcast, is being George Bailey's and trying to change perspectives to one that is more correct than what a lot of people are seeing.
So we need to get a Zoom going with Pete Hegseth. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. I can get that set up, and you can present your whole plan to him.
Well, I am going to do a podcast next week that I'm going to send to you with a group up here in Phoenix, and it's just going to be totally on this, Don. And I'm going to try to go through the whole thing. And I mean, you can't go through the whole thing because I've taken a week before in Gettysburg or traveling to teach Constitution and the founding. But an hour of different ways to do it. But I'll do one more comment, and that is, it's really about being a team and thinking about what makes a great team. And at our founding, people who didn't share our principles and values, people who didn't share our vision, and then people who didn't acquiesce to the Constitution or structure either left, we killed them, or they either went to Canada, England, they died in the revolution, or we basically took their stuff and kicked them out. So we had a cohesive team during that time. And Washington knew this. Washington said, if we can keep this team together and learn to execute on what we have, which is priority of principles, the vision and the why, and then the structure, if we could execute on that, we'll be the wealthiest nation on earth in 20 years. He understood that. And any great team like the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Boston Red Sox, if you have your priorities down, know your why, and have the structure together, have the right people in the right places, and learn how to execute. And we as a nation used to have this. And we're going to try to get it back. But there's so many that do not believe in the ideals of the Declaration, think the Constitution's outdated. And we certainly learned over COVID that it's not liberty or death. It's, if I have even a one inkling chance of any harm, save me. And so we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, very good. Okay. So listen, are you up against the clock now? It's 10
I
after.
am.
Okay. So
I'm up against the clock. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next week.
Yeah, we'll let you get on the road and be safe,
all right,
Jeff, and
thanks, guys.
Take care of yourself. Thanks,
appreciate
Jeff.
you all.
I appreciate you too. Oh, hey, by the way, sorry. I was going to let him know I'm sending him a digital camera so he can start recording his meetings.
Oh, cool.
His Heirs of the Republic and his presentations. So how did your election integrity presentation go, Ken?
It went well. I presented last Friday morning to the Pima County Election Integrity Commission, which was created about 20 years ago. First county in America that ever created a election integrity commission to advise the Board of Supervisors on election issues. About 20 years ago, there was a new transportation authority tax election that occurred in Tucson, and it's now been proven that there was quite a bit of manipulation in that election to come up with the result they wanted, which it passed, and they've been paying the tax for 20 years. But it went well. I I've been asked and I've accepted to be the chair of the board of directors of an organization called Audit USA. And it's all about election integrity, how to make elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. And the main point we were trying to present to them is that we've developed a tool, basically using a Microsoft Excel program with some macro functions that, there's nothing magic to it, but it basically takes a file of the ballot images that are sitting over on some computer somewhere that the county has, and the record of the votes that were cast. There's a spreadsheet called the cast vote record, and each row in that spreadsheet is a specific ballot. And basically this Excel program that we've come up with, we call it ABE, a better election, correlates those two and brings them together so that you can hyperlink and very quickly you can look at a ballot image and then see that, the voter, you don't know which voter it is. So the voter is still anonymous, as we need to protect, but you can tell that they voted for Smith in this race and Jones in this race and Garcia in that race. And then you can go immediately to that corresponding row in the cast vote record and make sure that the system recorded a vote for Smith and Jones and Garcia. Then you can add up the columns for Smith and Jones and Garcia and confirm that those are the totals that the county told us each candidate got. Basically, it's total transparency and verifiability of elections.
Is this something that you would turn loose in each of the counties?
We love to, yes.
Yeah.
We're not selling it. We give it away free.
Right.
We would basically give this to counties, and county boards of supervisors in Arizona revised statutes have the authority to release the ballot images. There are counties around America that already do this. We showed them examples of Dane County in Wisconsin, and another county in, where was the other one? Massachusetts, I think. Anyway, we showed them some examples of ballot images and cast vote records in other counties around the country. Idaho, the largest county in Idaho that includes the Boise area, already does this. There's a county in Texas that does this using other systems. There's 3 or 4 systems. We're not trying to sell our system. We're just trying to encourage county boards of supervisors to be totally transparent and release the ballot images and the cast vote record after an election so anybody can see that it matches.
Ken, this what you're doing here, excuse me, this is post-election.
Yes. We would encourage them. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Paul, but you can continue. Right now, it would obviously be post-election, but we would encourage them to use this tool internally before the election is certified, but then allow the ballot images and the cast vote record to be publicly accessible post-election.
Okay. Well, I'm flashing back to a letter I got this morning from Mark Kelly about wanting to restrict magazine size and AR platform weapons because they're the ones that are used the most in mass shootings, which I think is not true. But my point is that what I sent back to him was what we need is not bans on guns. What we need is education on civics and Christianity or religion to keep people from doing the wrong thing in the first place. And this is where your program that you're looking at right here seems to me that unless the voters and the voting officials have really good intentions, and that's hard to quantify, yes, we'll be able to catch them, but then you go through a whole process like we've done in Arizona, trying to get the process to come up with the right answers and the valid and the true election. And that's, I'm just.
Well, even if this data is released post-election, I believe very, very strongly that if county election officials know that the ballot images and the cast vote record are going to be public documents, after the election, they are going to think more than twice about intentionally or allowing any manipulation to have occurred in the election.
Yeah. You would think that would be a stark reality.
I think I think it would be a huge deterrent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
if you think that people have been stealing elections, and I know there are a lot that are convinced that that's what happened in 2020 and 2022 and before and whatever, but the best antiseptic is sunshine. And if you have total transparency, and if the voters and the citizens and the election officials know that after the election results are released and certified, that we're going to be able to see the ballot images and the cast vote record and add it up ourselves, I think you deter almost any manipulation.
I guess what I was trying to say, Kim and Don, is okay. So that I agree with what you're saying. That would preclude people from doing gross changes at the post-election level. But we got to go back to the voter registration and the voting rolls.
Well, good point, Paul. And I presented my 5 key principles of election integrity. And the first one starts in integrity in the voter rolls. Right. State law already says that the list of voters by name and by address is public information. And other than about 8,000 voters in Arizona whose names are redacted from the voter rolls because they're judges, they're battered spouses, they are police officers, whatever, the rest of the 4.3 million registered voters in Arizona, our name and our address is a public record. So when I say integrity in the voter rolls, I say, before an election, we should be looking at, in Yavapai County, how many Kenneth Roy Bennett's are registered, or look at addresses and see, right, at 123 Maple Street, is there a Kenneth Roy Bennett and my wife Jean? Okay, we know that's where they live. But if there's a Kenneth Roy and a Kenny and a Ken and a Kenneth R and if there's 8 variations of Kenneth Roy Bennett registered at the same address, then we know we have a problem. Or if there's 400 people registered. When I was Secretary of State and we were reviewing a statewide election back in 2010, we looked at every county in the state to see how many voters were voting at the same address. And we thought we had found a big problem in Maricopa County because we found 438 voters voting at one address. And so we went out there, and it was a retirement home. There were 650 people that lived there, and 438 had voted, and it was not a problem. But if it had been a 2-bedroom house and it was a drop house or something,
that would have been bad.
That we'd have found something.
Yeah,
a clue.
So the first principle, the first step, is integrity in the voter rolls, names and addresses. Second, you want to make sure that only people from that list vote in the election. Third, you want to make sure that for every voter, there's one ballot, no more, no less. So nobody's introducing ballots around the back door or whatever. Fourth is this comparison between the ballot images and the cast vote record to make sure that those jive. And then the cherry on the top, if you want to, the fifth one is probably a random sample process to spot check ballot images and compare them to the actual paper ballot to make sure that nobody manipulated the ballot images themselves. Okay. Because one way you could manipulate an election is put a little program thing in there that when you find a ballot that you like, you use that ballot to replace every 13th ballot or every 7th ballot in the system. And but spot checking, the number 5th one would be making sure that the ballot images correspond exactly to the paper ballots themselves. So those are the 5 ways to, I think, make sure our elections are secure.
So this program is something you could share with other states too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have a contact in Texas, Ken. Her name's Dr. Laura Presley.
Okay.
And she's involved with election integrity in Texas. She has her own group. She ran for an election in the city of Austin, and she ended up losing to this young man. And she looked at the statistical probability of that happening. She's an engineer, and so she decided to fight it in the Texas Supreme Court, and she won. But she didn't win. She won a year later. So they couldn't do anything about the election. They couldn't change it, but she won. So
well, one
she's
of the members
heavily involved now in Texas, in the state of Texas.
One of the members on our board of directors of this Audit USA is Benny Smith. He's a Democrat, African American from Tennessee, Memphis area. He's now a state election commissioner. But the way he got there is about 10, 12 years ago. He caught Shelby County, Tennessee election officials changing the vote totals by taking away votes from less desired candidates, in their opinion, and giving them to others. And the way he caught them, he happened to be at a polling location one night when the poll closed at 7 p.m. and you print a close out the day report at a polling location, and he happened to snapshot with his cell phone the poll total tape that showed Smith had 600 votes and Jones had 400 votes. And later that night, around midnight, when they announced the results by each precinct, they were flipped. They had taken 200 from Smith and given them to Jones. And he went in and they found 28 precincts in which election officials had colluded to take a number of votes away from someone they didn't like and give them to a person they did like. The vote totals stayed the same, so they still had the correct number of total votes in that precinct.
Just who you
but
voted
they
for.
had manipulated. It was called fraction magic. Bloomberg did a 1-hour documentary about it about 10 years ago.
Wow.
And that propelled Benny into some notoriety there in Tennessee, and he's on our board. We have board members from Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida and New York and California.
Good. That's great. Yeah. Let me know who you got from Florida.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I can't think. Susan Pinchon.
Susan Pinchon. Is she a government person there, or just a?
No, I think she's more of an advocate, a watchdog kind of person,
all right.
regular citizen.
I'll look her up, see what she's at.
Susan Pinchon.
Yeah. So, okay, guys. Well, we ran through everything we were going to talk about. I appreciate that input, Ken. Good stuff.
You bet.
There's nothing more important than election integrity. It really isn't, And it seems like
couldn't agree more.
Every 2 years we're talking about election integrity, right? So.
Yep.
And I understand, like you, there are some people that are just never going to believe we're ever going to have election integrity. But, paper ballots, one-day elections, cut them off.
If we check the voter registration,
yeah.
If we make sure that only people from that list vote, if we make sure there's one ballot for every person that voted, no more or less, if we make sure the ballot images match the cast vote record, and we randomly spot check some ballot images to the paper ballots, we can have total election integrity.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's the goal then, right?
I still think we ought to dip their index finger in purple ink when they vote.
Yeah, well, they tried that a few places, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least they know you voted all. When you go back in with a purple finger, you can't vote again. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay, guys, thanks very much, Ken. Thanks very much, Paul. And we thank Jeff for being on tonight. This is 4 Men in America. And we're going to sign off now. Subscribe and hit the like button. And we will see you all next week. And thanks, Ken and Paul, again. We really appreciate you joining us. Good night, America.
Thank you, Don.
Thank
Adios.
you.
If you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better.